Google Voice is great, but I always wanted to have an automatic reply. If someone texted outside of business hours, they'd get a text message back, ideally within a couple minutes or so. So there were some solutions out there that I looked into. At the time, I had a little phone business going, and it was nice to let people know that this was the right number, and let them know when they could expect a reply. So there were a couple solutions out there. A lot of them were out of date, or they didn't really fit with the way that I liked to handle Google Voice. I remember there was one that worked, but the emails that you received had to remain unread. The way that I was using Google Voice, I had to read, or I liked to read those emails as they came in. So the way that it works is there's a switch you can flick in Google Voice to automatically forward text messages as emails to a specific account. It's kind of like the first piece of this automation. Next piece was setting up a Google Apps script to run every so often to check for any emails that you received that looked like one of those Google Voice notifications. If it found one of those, it would check the email, make sure it hadn't already been replied to, make sure that the email came in when your business was closed, and if it met those requirements, it would automatically reply to that email, which Google Voice would interpret as a text back, which would send the text back to whoever tried to reach out. Let's pull up an example script so I can show you in detail about how it works. So it's going to look a little odd. There's a couple reasons I did it this way. We can talk about it a little bit later. We have the auto-reply message, just an array of the days. This makes it a little bit easier for the secret feature I'll talk about later. But we get the current date, strip out the hours, figure out what day it is, figure out the minutes, and then we call this function is closed to figure out if we're closed right now at this new date that we got. Definitely prettier ways to do this. Right now I think this is set up to return an auto-reply message all the time. Business is closed all the time. It looks a little bit weird. You could just return true, right, if you were closed all the time. But one of the features I like to have in a website I made, outlining how this all works, outlining how to set it up, is to have a way to automatically generate this script for people who may be less technical and still want to set this up, for people who just don't have the time to bother with the code, but still to be able to give those people a little bit of control over what the script does when it replies. So it's not super efficient, it's not super pretty right now, this function, but the way that it's built makes it a little bit easier to generate, for example, a script that would automatically reply Saturday and Sunday before 9 a.m. or after 8 p.m., for example. So the script figures out if the business is currently closed. If they are, it'll go out into Gmail, get a couple of the latest threads, look through them, and what I found was most of the emails that come from Google Voice, the forwarded texts, start with this new text message from. So I'm just crossing my fingers that Google's not going to change that anytime soon. It's been working for a couple years now, so that seems to be a reliable way of detecting those new text messages. And then there's a couple things it checks. Checks if we've already replied, checks if the person texted us while we were closed, and then it also checks to see if it just came in. There were a couple bugs I ran into that justified each one of these different checks. Already replied, there was a situation where I would keep receiving these text messages as long as that new text message email was in the top 7 threads in Gmail. This just came in make sure that if you're having a slow day and you're not getting many emails, we only reply to emails that came in recently. And this is like 5 minutes, milliseconds, because one of the pieces of the script is to set up this script to run every so often. I was running into API limits when it was running once every minute. I think once every minute is the fastest you can do it with Google Apps script. But once every 5 minutes, I found struck a nice balance. And I don't really run into those API limits anymore. And the last little bit, texted while closed, just making sure that when the message was sent, it was sent while we were closed. I don't remember why we checked twice. I guess it can't really hurt, right? And then if we haven't already replied and we texted and they texted us while we were closed and the message just came in, we send out the message. This is just tacking on a new reply, and we don't do anything fancy here. We just tack on whatever the auto reply message was. So we can take a look at the script generator now. This is hopefully a friendlier way to generate this code than writing out by hand. You can set whatever message you like. Just the default is to auto reply all the time, but then it also lets you customize this for Saturday. It's the auto reply all day long, and then you can customize the time ranges that it gets sent out. So if we copy this code, it doesn't take long at all. If we paste it back in here, we can take a look at what it generated. So it added in test for the auto reply message. That's what the person typed in. And then if we look down, it is closed. You see this structure kind of makes a little bit more sense now. For each one of the days, if you'll remember, we wanted to auto reply before, a little bit earlier on Monday, a little bit later on Monday, 9 to 5, Tuesday through Friday, and then all day, Saturday and Sunday. So we can take a look at how the website generates this code now. It's not very fancy, it's not very pretty, but it does work, and it seems to work for a couple people. There have been a few bugs here and there, but generally it seems to work okay. A lot of this script is the same no matter what kinds of customizations you have. You can see here where we're adding in the message that the user typed into the text area. It's a lot more of all the code that's shared between. Again, I'm not saying this is how you should write code, but it does work for me. Maybe you'll come up with a better way to write this. So for each one of the days, so each day of the week, we create sort of our little if statement or else if statement, depending on which day of the week it is. Of course, since this is kind of in a chain, for the first day of the week, it'll have to start with an if, but then all the others will be else if. We have a couple defaults here if we didn't get any custom time ranges passed into us. Here you can kind of see where we're building out the if statement. So the first bit where the day is checked. To me, it was easier to debug this. It seems to be easier to maintain if these days are passed in as days of the week instead of numbers. I always found how JavaScript does time to be a little confusing. So you can see how we make a check for the day, and then we pass in the start hour. So if someone sets the start hour, the way that the website tries to communicate this to them is before this hour, the auto reply will go out, and then after the end hour and end minute we have here, after that point in time, the auto reply will go out. So if it meets all these requirements, we return true, and it's that is closed function that we're returning true from. Otherwise, we return false. This last little piece is sort of tying it all together, creating the is closed function, adding all this time range code we generated, and then returning false if none of these caught. And then there's a little bit down here I was trying to think about, there's probably some kind of a bug here in all of this code where it might not work correctly. I could see like in a situation where Google Apps Script is running in a different time zone, maybe than the Google Voice number. Maybe it's off by an hour or two if you're using a Google Apps Script account in one time zone, but then using the phone number in a different time zone. I haven't heard any feedback from people running into that bug, but I could see that something is happening. And this is just something I do in my spare times. If it's not causing people problems, why worry about it? People seem to be pretty happy with how it works so far.
I like that.
Here's the website itself. If you're curious, or if you want to set this up, googlevoiceautoreply.com. I have a nice little animation up here that plays, sort of showing how it works. You send a text message, you get one back. It's pretty unlikely that it'll be that quick, but since it runs every 5 minutes, maybe, I think on average it'd probably be about 2.5 minute response time. The little preamble, if you find it helpful, you can always send me a tip. It's much appreciated. If you're curious about whether this is still working or not, I'm recording this January 2022. You can text this phone number here, and if you get a reply back, then 5 minutes or so, I'm still chugging along. Google hasn't banned me yet. I haven't been kidnapped and stuck in a Google gulag yet. So if you have a bit of time, you can walk through these instructions. I've tried to make it as simple as possible, and I have updated these screenshots with the most recent versions of Google Voice, Google Apps Script. It might only be about a month or so out of date, so it should be pretty up to date. There's the little switch I was talking about where you forward the messages to your email. You have to connect to Google Apps Script. That's pretty quick. Then here in Google Apps Script, creating a new project, giving you a useful name, and then of course generating your script with whatever message you'd like, custom auto reply pattern if you'd like, just pasting it into Google Apps Script, trying to make it as easy as possible, saving it, and then after you save it, adding a new trigger to run this script automatically every 5 minutes. Probably the trickiest bit of all this is if you run into the script authorization error. I think this is tripping up quite a few people, and this will usually be different in every browser. I really only check this in Firefox, but if this happens, you have to allow pop-ups. Google's trying to protect you. If you don't trust this code, I guess you just have to stop the instructions here or talk to a programmer you do trust. You have to go down to advanced, do the unsafe thing of continuing to the script. Again, if you want to ask, any JavaScript developer should be able to review this code and let you know it's not, siphoning off your emails and sending it to my friends in Russia. And then, it does look a little frightening, I guess, if you're seeing this and you see, the script can read, compose, send, and permanently delete email addresses. But the thing about all the code is it's pretty straightforward. It's all in the open. Again, if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to do any of this. I'm not going to make you. But if you want it to work, this is what you have to do. There's little statistics down here I added recently to kind of get a sense of, okay, how many people are getting down here to the end and how many people is it working for. So I have this, and we can take a look at that, the statistics in a bit. Not many people are visiting it right now, but it might be a little interesting. And then down at the bottom, a little recommendation about how to test. If you're having trouble, you can go down here and it'll send me an email. So this email is where you want me to reply to whatever question or feedback you have here. And this is a new feature. I now offer priority support. If you really want to answer your question quickly, then 24 business hours, pay $10, and that 24-hour reply time is guaranteed. Your money back. But most people, I think, these days are opting for basic support. It's not urgent. Let's take a look at some of these statistics. So I set up Plausible maybe a month or so back. I like it because you can just run it on your own server. I like how it's very easy to set up. I like how privacy conscious it is. It doesn't seem as intrusive as something like Google Analytics, and although these statistics may be a little basic, it gives me enough of a sense of who's visiting. You get some nice statistics about the devices, countries people are visiting from, the sources. Of course, there's only a single page right now, so this isn't super interesting. But one of the nice bits I set up later was sort of tying in these two buttons, yes or no, the instructions worked or not, into Plausible. It's really easy to just send a little message when someone clicks one of these, and you can see it's not great, maybe about 30% of people who made it all the way down to the bottom and decided to click one of those buttons were able to get it working out the gate. Out of these 7, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 reached out through that support forum. I guess the other people just didn't want to bother or too busy. But I mean, it is a little involved. I mean, there's a lot of steps here, so I can kind of understand why there's not really all that many people who make it all the way down to the bottom and to do everything right. Again, I've tried to make it as simple as possible, but I guess for some people this might still be a little challenging. There's a couple tricky things that I haven't included in this. I'm planning on making some changes soon to improve this, but one of the requirements is to have the Google account you're using for Google Apps Script, and it has to be the same Google account that you're forwarding the Google Voice text messages to. I don't think the piece of this script where you get the inbox threads would work correctly. If you're checking the wrong Gmail account, you may never receive those forwarded text messages from Google Voice. That could be one reason why it's not working for all these people. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and this definitely is a little hacky, but this seemed to be the easiest way I was able to find of getting this to work. It's worked well for me for a couple of years, and I get feedback from people who say it's working, and some people are clicking this button down here. I don't hear from all of them, but it's good to know that it's helpful. See you next time.